Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on. Time out, time out, time out. What do you mean I was right? Wait. You mean to tell me that my thoughts and opinion about what Final Fantasy VII Remake is actually factual? That it's exactly what the developers are trying to do with the remake project? You're telling me I was right this entire time? You're telling me that this is a full-blown remake of an old story with additions, subtractions, small changes, but keeping the same major plot points, enhancing the same themes of the original Final Fantasy VII is what the devs are actually doing? Wait, hold on, no. That's silly. Why would the devs make a game called Final Fantasy VII Remake and just keep it similar but make these changes like the whispers and changing fade and, why would the devs lie to us? Why would the devs lie to us about any of this? Just to keep the original story intact, but enhancing certain themes, enhancing certain situations and plot points, adding certain smaller things to certain plot points, subtracting things that just didn't fit or didn't make sense back in the old day. Like, that's silly talk. We're talking about multiverse theory. We're talking about different worlds. We're talking about all of this, that Avon Children, it all started in Avon Children. Sephiroth lost, and now Sephiroth is going back in time to fix what happened in the OG timeline to create a different future. And now Cloud, Aerith, and everyone else has to stop him from doing that. Aerith will come back to life. Zack is in the story too because they just wanted to add it because of Crisis Core. Let's face it, that's all that it was. All of that makes way more sense than this idea that I have said constantly that the devs are doing the definitive edition of Final Fantasy VII. That this remake project isn't going to go into such a grander, ending. A different ending. An ending that would change everything from Aerith coming back to life, from this and that. No, that's just silly talk. Why would the devs just reconfirm once again that all of this is just an enhanced version of the original Final Fantasy VII? I'm usually not right about a lot of things, but I think what I am usually, have a good understanding of, that doesn't mean I'm always right, but at least have a good understanding of, is exactly what it means when a game has the title of remake on it. And that is that it is remaking something, remaking an old project, an old story, using the newer technology available, right, to recreate that story. Using the newer technology, allowing yourself the ability to do certain things that you were not able to do back in those days because technology did not allow you to, or you were limited with the technology during that time. But now that you have the technology available to you, you are now able to do everything that you wanted to do back then and bring it more to life, a definitive version of the original story. And to me, that made a lot more sense. That they were doing all of this. They were not trying something different. They were enhancing the themes of Final Fantasy VII, providing more context of those themes, providing more context of certain scenes and major plot points throughout the story, and just enhancing those things. Maybe giving you a different perspective of certain major plot points to give you, the older player, a different feel for Final Fantasy VII, but keeping the same story that you love. The same story that you love intact. And allowing newer players to experience that same story. The same story that you, the older player who loved Final Fantasy VII back in 1997, and giving them the opportunity to experience why you loved it. Hamaguchi has stated this once again. And this is a pattern. This is a pattern that has constantly happened with a lot of the devs who have spoken about the remake project, whether it's Nojima, whether it's Nomura, that the Final Fantasy VII Remake Project isn't going to include some massive and drastic changes to the original story of Final Fantasy VII. They have reiterated this several times. And Hamaguchi recently, in an interview with Square Enix, talking about the Switch 2 release of Final Fantasy VII Remake, that once again, that this remake project was started because they wanted to introduce Final Fantasy VII to a newer generation. Newer players who never got to experience the OG or never were interested maybe in playing the OG because they weren't fans or like weren't interested in the gameplay or the original graphics of the OG, and have decided to create this remake project not only as their final dance, their final opportunity to really take a look at this game, take a look at the story, and give you their, final version of that story, but also to give newer players the opportunity to experience the same story that you, the older player, always loved. And they decided that in order to really capture you, the older player, to give you a different perspective of the story of Final Fantasy VII that not only enhances the actual story, but maybe enhances or like makes you or allows you to see a different perspective of those major plot points that you loved, and just give you a little different view of it, just so that it could keep you, interested in the remake project, to keep you constantly talking and bringing you closer to those new players who never got to experience Final Fantasy VII the same way you did, the new generation, and allow you, the older generation, to play a game that still has those same elements of the story you love, just with enhancement, additions, subtractions, different point of views to keep both of you interested in the entire trilogy. That's what all of this was all about. That's what they all want to do with this remake project. This is their final time. The final time they will actually really touch, and I mean the original developers will actually touch Final Fantasy VII, and they wanted to do it. They wanted to do it in a different way that you, the older player, can constantly be discussing it, can constantly be intrigued by what will happen in part 3. But it will keep the same core of the story, the same themes, without any drastic changes. And you see that constantly. Look, I understand. Final Fantasy VII Remake, Chapter 18, had something weird going on with the Whispers. At the time, I was one of the people who believed that, they're actually doing something different. It's not just a remake. They're actually going to essentially reimagine the entire story, like reimagine everything. But they're just reimagining the actual original story. Because Rebirth showed you that all the major plot points of the actual story of Final Fantasy VII are still intact. There's no major changes, right? If you believe that Everett will survive at the end and really want that to happen, it doesn't seem like that's the path they're going to take, right? Because they would have saved her at that point in time instead of killing her off. Now, of course, there's always a chance that I am wrong, and they will do something interesting in part 3. But I think part of the problem is a lot of people who want a lot of these major changes to happen, or these theorists who want these major changes to occur, because they don't want to be incorrect. They fully believe that what they think is the devs' intentions and what they are trying to do is vastly different in creating this whole multiverse idea, or some other, theory or idea that they truly believe in and try to stick into people's minds in hopes that it eventually comes true because they want to be right. Because as a theorist, the one thing that gives you legitimacy and validation is coming up with a theory that eventually comes true. So many people want that validation. So many people want to be right, because that's where your credibility always comes from. To me, I have never once thought that way. I have never once thought that way. And I'm sure other people have as well. You creating a theory and wanting it to be right to have any sort of credibility in the community, that doesn't mean you have to force a theory onto other people or try to never double down when you are incorrect. Because to me, I think a theorist is more respected if they admit that their theory is wrong. that they were wrong about their theory. And that whatever they do decide upon is a lot more interesting and a lot more, fascinating. Because trying to be right on a theory or like whatever the game occurs, is exciting. I'm not going to lie. Like, whenever I get a theory right, which is very rare, by the way, I get excited, right? But I know that I'm mostly going to be wrong, and I accept that, oh, the devs did something different than I thought. Okay, let's take a look at what they did and analyze that. To me, that's a much healthier mindset. Never doubling down on your theory and trying to say, like, what the devs are doing is exactly what you think they're doing, and trying to twist every single like little small thing in favor of yours, and then when it doesn't happen you start blaming the devs, for like, the devs caved in, or the devs lied to us because of this and that, the marketing or something like that. That you come off as someone who, to me at least, loses more credibility than could ever gain any. Right? I get it. You don't have to like what they do. Right? There's a big difference to not liking what they do and blaming them for lying to you and, making you, or trying to make you think of a false theory or a narrative, and them just lying to you because it didn't come true. There's a big difference between that. I choose to accept being wrong. And I know other theorists do as well. And to me, that is much more healthier of an outlook. I get it. We all want to be right. But if the devs constantly reiterate the same thing, and it's just not one dev but multiple devs, that the story that they respect so much is not going to change, that they want to keep it or at least keep it respectful to the original story. If they keep saying this, then like, who else should we believe? I get it. Sometimes devs lie to people. Sometimes people say things that they don't actually mean, and then they do something else. They say one thing, then they do something else just to keep you in suspense. I get that. But if it's a constant thing, if it's a pattern that they continuously do it, I mean, why would we not believe them? Is it because we don't want to be wrong? Is it because we lose credibility if our theory doesn't come true? I don't know. Right? I get it. You all want something from Final Fantasy VII, right? Whether it's wishes of a ship, whether it's wishes of a character staying alive. The point is, they have been constantly telling you what they're doing, and they've been showcasing it. They've done it in Rebirth. I get it. That Chapter 18 in Remake, it made me confused. It made me wondering if, they're going to do certain things. But when the next game comes out, as in Rebirth, and all the major plot points are still there without any sort of like difference, then maybe we thought wrong. Maybe because we don't have all three parts, that like we don't know the full story, that everything is going to connect in part 3. And I hope it does. Right? I really hope it does. I get it. Sephiroth says some weird things. Everett, apparently seemingly knows stuff from the future. I get it. All of this just seems like they're doing something way more that could mean a multiverse theory. Could mean there's different worlds. But at the same time, if they're going to respect the original story, then it can't be a sequel. At least to me, in my opinion, it can't be a sequel. Because why would that be respectful to the original story if you're completely changing it? To me, it would be more disrespectful to change the original story of Final Fantasy VII. I get it. Well, then it's not the original story. It is a sequel, right? But why would they do that if their goal was to bring in new players into the franchise? Right? I get it. Remake to many people seem like, oh, it's about essentially, giving a gift to the old players who have wanted a remake. A one-to-one remake. But that's never was their intention. And they've constantly said that. Look, at the end of the day, I could be wrong. At the end of the day, maybe Hamaguchi is lying to me. But I will accept that I was lied to. I will accept that my theory, or like what I originally thought, was wrong. Right? But I'm happy to know that what I think they're doing with the remake project is exactly the same thing they're reiterating countless times. Right? It doesn't make me happy? Yes. Will I be sad if they don't, do it in part 3 and they completely change it? I won't be sad. I won't be angry. I'll be like, huh, interesting. Let's see why or where they're going with this. Why did they choose to do this? And analyze from that. Why? Because I am perfectly fine with being alright. And I think most people should start just realizing that being wrong isn't bad. Just continue making theories, continue making ideas, and people will like you because of who you are and your mind process. Just because it doesn't come true doesn't mean that you yourself should feel that your entire, ideology, your entire thinking process is bullshit or fake or lose credibility. Because to me, that's kind of like, it just sucks in general. Like, that's not, I mean, it just sucks. I don't know how else to put it. But regardless of what happens or what happens in part 3, I do think that a lot of theorists and a lot of people who really want certain things to happen in Final Fantasy VII should be a little calmer. At the end of the day, it's the story that we love, and we're seeing it through a different perspective, as Hamaguchi says. And hell, when it ends, it would have been one of the best rides I've ever had, at least. And I know it probably will be you as well. So, who knows? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of my Final Fantasy VII's, my DS theories, and thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.